So we wanted to create some space at the end of the day to really allow some reflection by each of you and really getting a chance to not only think about the day. We've had a long day in terms of looking at the different policy level implications for each of your work, looking at practice level, lessons learned, challenges to implementation, and really wanted to get a chance to hear from you all as those important bridges between the global policy discourse and local actions that's happening on the ground, kind of how to make sense of this. We have had many opportunities throughout your residency here over the last 4.5 months to really get in depth into each of your work, conversations that the audience hasn't been privy to. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to open up some of those conversations to really give them a sense of, how are you all connecting those dots? How are you all leveraging the, not only your own research, but also the resources that have, come at the beginning of the program, throughout the program, that will be coming after the program in terms of really kind of catalyzing some of those deeper systemic change that we've been talking about all throughout the day. So I wanted you all to kind of maybe reflect a little bit on how you see the threads running through your work, early childhood, adolescence, transitions to work. How do you all see the importance and kind of those connecting points, those bridges? Any of you guys start?
All right. This is a wonderful program, I have to say. Already we have passed 4.5 months. And we always used to say that Samukta is going to start with the early childhood, and then she is supposed to send them to the secondary level. I will take care for the STEM and other skills, and then Anil will take care that whether they can complete for the to the work transition. So this is the way we are working, and we found lots of challenges, barriers, and sometimes it happened that when we got some resources, I said that Samukta, this STEM knowledge is exactly required for the child education, and vice versa in the same way. So this is the bridge we made, and I think my colleague can say what happened.
Yeah, I think connecting the dots is very important, especially when we are talking about education across girls' lifetime. So early childhood is the foundation which prepares children for their childhood, where STEM comes. And I think STEM again, preparing children for adolescent, this childhood to adolescent, adulthood, childhood to livelihood is very important, and that would again be a very good foundation for different choices, careers, and for the education in future. Especially in terms of TVET, STEM would be a very good foundation. And and I think working together here for the last 4.5 months, in these 3 different areas was, I think, a wonderful experience, and I'm sure we were also able to learn from each other a lot. And then also it helped to connect these dots.
Mm-hmm. But then, going back even to this morning's panel where we talked about the need to really focus and, learning across a lifetime or thinking about entry points across a lifetime, do we risk diluting our organizational efforts, or is there something that needs to be better coordinated across? I mean, each of you sit at a practitioner perspective, and so I'm really curious how you see this balance between diluting versus focusing at a specific entry point. Maybe.
Yeah. What you're saying is absolutely true, and I think we always need to think about: do I want to spread my efforts, or do I want to go in depth with one of them? And I think my learning with the scholars has been that one may focus on one area, but one has to be mindful of what came before and what comes after. So my solution is not. It's not going to, it may mitigate some of the disadvantage that we see, but it may not be enough. I may still need yet another solution. But to be mindful of that, I think would also help me to think about how my solution needs to be. So for instance, I was thinking that, there may be so many, we are talking about a gender transformative approach in the early years today. But there are so many millions who are going to reach secondary education anyway, before what I'm saying actually takes shape. And so for people in middle school and later on to be mindful that these are children coming without a preschool education may change what you're going to be doing in the later years. So I feel like to be cognizant of it, even though you're not, but to know the whole picture before you narrow down on, one of the people in that picture would be important.
Right, so it's quite cyclical. On the one hand, we're trying to catch those who have already gone or already in the system to make sure that their transition to livelihoods and adulthood is smooth, and then while also ensuring that those who are entering the system are having a very transformed sort of experience, right?
Yeah.
Well, how do any of the other two of you see that?
I think it's good to have this specific focus on one area, but that doesn't mean that, but you need to be aware, because after all, they are all connected. So if you are engaged and aware about, it's again like childhood to livelihood or childhood to adulthood, and there are different stages, it's a cycle. And I might be focused in one area, but if I'm not aware about the other area, how can I prepare for the next stage? It's again, so in terms of my organization, yes, we are more into Tibet, but we also support the basic education, so that when they complete basic education, they have at least this qualification, so that they can go into Tibet or like secondary, post-secondary level of education.
That's great. So today we've also been trying to tackle the task of connecting research to policy to practice. And given that you all are practitioners, you have that important sort of position in our ecosystem of work to really bring all those pieces together. And so I wanted to ask Nasreen, your work in our morning session around the policy and our afternoon breakout session around practice has really tried to tackle the issue of STEM education and STEM education as an entry point into that broader opportunity to learn the breadth of skills, right? It's not just about the STEM subjects, but it's about STEM skills and the kinds of thinking and skills that STEM can enable. So how do you see your organization bridging the research, not only that your work has presented, but the work of others in this space, to the policy, to the practice? How do you see your organization kind of really being that bridge?
Yes. So let me give an example that in 2015, when we just introduced the term STEM in front of teachers, after that, after 4 or 5 years and now, recently I came to know that one of our ministers said that I heard about STEM, how could we implement it? So this is the policy and practice if we start our work and we can knock to the policymakers that yes, it is highly required. And vice versa, policymakers also can bring some good solution and suggestion from different countries and talk to the practitioners. But definitely the bridge is required, that we have to inform to our policymakers, and they have to understand that practitioners who are working, NGOs who are working and civil society who are working, from them also we have to take some idea and suggestion how they are working in the field level. So in this way we are working with the policymakers, and when I will go back, so we have to continuously knock for a good education system and curriculum. And in any program, we always try to keep the policymakers, the ministry level people, so that we can give the message to them. So the dialogue, the symposium, or any workshop, we always welcome them from different sectors, education sectors and other sectors and foreign affairs sectors as well, so that we can give them the message. Especially now what we said in Brookings, what we did in our research, it's our duty. I think that I will go back and I will definitely share it with our policymakers so that it will be easier for me to implement it in the field.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Samyukta, with your work, you also sit at a very unique moment. In the morning's panel, we talked about the unique policy moment with the new draft of the education policy and its attention to the early childhood years. I'm curious, after your 2 sessions, focused on those policy implications and then focus on the challenges of actually doing that work and expanding preschools into the government schools, what might existing practices illustrate are things that are missing in the policy? And what might some of the policy discussions indicate to you might be missing in practice, or potentially impede good practice, or facilitate new practice? I'm curious about the both ways. How does policy and practice come together now for you?
Yeah. So I think over the day we've been discussing what needs to be done, and really if we want practice to influence policy, then we need to demonstrate what things look like in practice, and do it at scale in a country like India, so that people wake up, watch, learn, and so that feeds back into the policy. But the policy, like in an earlier panel, this was mentioned, the policy in its approach, just the fact that they're giving so much importance to early childhood education. There's a 3 to 8 years continuum that they're talking about. That I think will facilitate, the environment within the country to begin to look at this. So I think it should be, and hopefully it will be, a symbiotic relationship. Having said that, the policy, does not talk about gender in the early years. In fact, it only talks about gender in the chapter on inclusive education. And to me, as a woman reading it, I felt like, who were the rest of the chapters for? So I feel like, but this is, I'm an optimist. So this is a draft policy. There's a draft, and so we've sent our recommendations saying, hey, we're out there to, can we do this? So practice, I think, changes policy, and policy does have the potential to change practice across the country. That's the sort of weight that it carries. And so I'm hoping that, with the sort of research that we've done here, and the kind of work that I hope to carry on back home, we'll be able to influence both, because they're equally important.
And to get some of the specifics too, you mentioned in some of our conversations, not fixing what isn't broken, right? And that there may be some really good things that the Anganwadi system has uncovered, especially through your research, that really, at a policy level, especially one that's sort of separate from the ministry that is responsible for the community-based education preschools, that they're missing. So I think there's another piece there. I don't know if you can comment on that one.
So I feel like sometimes policymakers look at structures and not at functions. And I think that's where the confusion begins. So for instance, it's not about, who's doing it, it's about what's happening. Right? So for instance, if you have teachers in community-based preschool centers out there with a bond with the community, how do you want to leverage that to move forward, rather than talking about introducing a new structure which has not formed that bond yet? So it's almost like you're reinventing the wheel. So the policy does say, bring in Anganwadis into schools. It says open up more preschools. It says open up more preschools within schools. It says strengthen everything around you. And it says keep it to the education department. So I think that can be very confusing, and it can also lead to a lot of wastage in time and effort, because you'll be looking at people who haven't really done things before, whereas right next to you outside the school you may have a neighborhood preschool center that has tried something, has failed, and we can learn from them. And that is something that I am concerned about, but I'm hopeful that over time we will be able to understand that we can learn from each other, rather than trying to shut down something and then starting a whole new process.
Yes, I want to add one thing, that sometimes our policymakers are too serious about something where they don't need to be too serious. So like teachers recruitment and recruitment of the school head, principal. So when the local leaders and politicians, they directly come and interfere that who will be the school head. So then we get some very bad or weird selection there in that case. So rather than doing that, they have to give emphasis for the good policy and education system, and they have to know that who is the right person for what. So we have to take care of that also.
Right, so getting rid of some of the inclinations to kind of fall into potentially corrupt practices, in terms of really thinking about how the political prestige is higher or greater than the quality of what's actually happening in the schools. I think that's a very important point too. So importantly, I think also all of your research has attempted to highlight the importance of addressing the underlying social and gender norms that are driving the gender unequal relations of power that are happening in and through the education system, which then negatively affects girls' learning outcomes, their life outcomes, and it just keeps going in a vicious cycle, right? Especially in the context that each of your work has illuminated for us. Anil, your work also really helped us see the connections between connecting kind of not only the supply and demand question, but really thinking about how do you change systems both at those angles. So you talked about the story of Lakshmi and how important it is to have the social safety nets to ensure that girls who are marginalized and vulnerable do not fall out of the system, out of the pathways from school to work. But at the same time, you're also talking about the systems change that needs to happen from industry, and really pushing the industry to, look inward and reflect on and radically change some of the gender stereotypes that are happening within industry and the gender structures and policies and processes that are preventing women and girls from entering the workforce. So how do we push the industry side? And I think this goes not only for the industry, but it also goes for maybe private sector partners who might be, in the previous panel, talking about the private sector partners that might be investing in STEM education in schools, or thinking about the education ministries. You mentioned how the Angavadis is all women. Essentially, every Angavadi teacher is a woman, and her support staff are women. So thinking about how do we really address this, the system that is inputting or receiving girls. I'm curious from your perspective, how can we ensure that we move the needle on that?
I believe the best way to influence someone is by working together. So yes, we need to work together with the private sector. If we don't engage them, then it's very difficult to push. So we need to make them partners. We need to collaborate, and there's a role, a key role from government side. Government and the responsible authorities, they have to promote and encourage the partnership, especially partnership between government agencies, private sector, and also in our case, it's a partnership which has worked very well, a partnership between NGOs and a private sector in the industry. And I also see there's a very good opportunity for private sectors. Not only opportunity, also obligations as part of their CSR, corporate social responsibility. So to invest in these kind of programs. And by investing this, it's not, as we said earlier, it's not just an investment. Mm-hmm. It brings return, which is also equally beneficial to them. Mm-hmm. Like when there is workforce ready population, train and skill people who they need, that's equally beneficial for them also. So, and in terms of, especially in terms of Tibet, there's this financing issue because Tibet is quite expensive than general education, and government alone cannot do. So there's a need of private sector's involvement. They have to finance, but also they get benefit. So that's, I think, how it works best. And again, so we need to have this kind of partnership. And but also from the top, from the high level, there should also be regulations and enforcement, together with encouraging and promoting. Mm-hmm. This should also be regulation, monitoring, and enforcement.
Great. Any other reflecting thoughts? So this morning we also talked in the very first panel about the global girls' education community really shifting the discourse and lifting the bar in terms of our vision for a gender-transformative education. And from your roles, especially thinking forward around how you will be that bridge between connecting what's happening in the global discourse to what's happening at home, I'm curious if you could sort of share your thoughts on whether this really is just a new buzzword, or do you see this discursive shift actually potentially shifting the way you all will do your work on the ground?
I think with my work here, I have been exposed to what gender transformation would entail? What not only what do the terms mean, but how does it open out in practice? Looking at research as well as what has been tried out in different countries. So I would say that there's a lot that I have learned which goes beyond the terminology or the buzzword of it, which I can take back home. But having said that, going back to my country, I will have to also think about the context, think about the language. And I remember talking to a professor here and we talked about different languages, and we said many of our languages don't even have a term for gender. And if we don't have a term for it, and the term that's there is so technical that most people don't know what it is. They don't understand it. So I will have to sort of translate that into something meaningful so that it actually works on the ground. And that's going to be my challenge.
Thank you.
Samukta is starting work from the preschool for gender-sensitive issue, gender-sensitive classroom, she is thinking. So then I was thinking that it starts basically from the embryo stage. So there are lots of examples in India and Bangladesh, I think in Nepal as well. Still, in the ultrasonography, when they come to know that that is the boy child or girl child, they go for abortion. Yeah. So if it is a girl child. So gender sensitive issues, these issues starts from that stage. Then it come in the preschool or the child. And now we are talking about the gender sensitive classroom. But what about the mindset, what starts from that level? So we have to think in that way, and we have to introduce it in our education curriculum so that boys and girls, they come to know that about this gender sensitive issue and how to value the human being, not considering that boy and girl. So we have to introduce it directly in our curriculum.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of a very strange ritual in the U.S. around gender reveal parties when a couple reveals the gender of their not yet born child. So I hear there's much to be made and needed to be done in terms of really transforming mindsets everywhere when it comes to that. Anil, any thoughts from you?
I feel myself more responsible now, especially given all the learnings and the exposure that I have had here. And so it somehow tells me now when I go back the need to review and reflect my own programs in my organization and to be critical and then try to revise, improve them from this new insight that I have got here, that I have learned. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think the audience might be very curious what each of you plans to do, the very first thing you've planned to do when you return home to see the vision that you all have laid out in your research. What do you hope to do when you get home to see that come into fruition?
We have miles to go, I have to say. But exactly what we are, my plan is, after going back, I will go for a month-long STEM program for the teachers training, dialogue, talk with the policy level people, and I'm committed to those 30 schools from where I have collected data and did survey. So we have to organize some teachers training and training for the students. So some STEM Olympiad and some fair, and I will figure out different programs and lots of idea I got from Brookings. So I'm going to implement it, and a month-long STEM program will be my first assignment, and then I will go forward.
Great. Victor, Anil, yeah?
Yeah, so my challenge is going to be to put into practice what I'm saying here so that I walk the talk. I hope to be able to set up a lab back home in partnership with the Delhi government where I can demonstrate what I mean when I talk about a gender transformative approach in early childhood education, so that I can, I may fail and I may succeed, but there'll be a learning out of that. But I feel like we need to, I've been saying that practice needs to inform policy. So what does that practice look like is going to be my challenge back home. And I invite everyone here to, help me in overcoming this challenge because it's not an easy one.
We are with you.
I know.
There's a need for me when I go back. The first thing is to disseminate and inform the findings of my research to the relevant stakeholders. And also I have this opportunity because especially talking about TVET, we have this program, vocational training program that my organization runs, and we have this opportunity to provide this as a model to the government. So together with that model, the evidence that has worked very well, and together with the finding of my research, hope we'll be able to translate this practice into policy, into changing the education system, and focus and emphasize more technical and vocational education and training.
Great. Well, I want to thank you three for your incredible work and for the honor and privilege for allowing me to work alongside with you for the last 4.5 months. So just a huge round of applause to you all. So I know that I'm standing between you all and wine and some nice food, so I'm going to make my closing remarks very brief. I wanted to thank Rob Jenkins, our 3 moderators, who some are still in the room, our marvelous panelists who have really helped us to broaden and deepen our conversations throughout the day around early childhood education, STEM education, and technical and vocational education and training. It hasn't been, it's not every day that we get to squeeze all 3 of these different entry points into a single symposium, so thank you all for making the conversations possible. I also wanted to thank the team, Amanda Braga, Natalie Geismar, Lorena Masonette, Katie Portnoy, Sarah Painting, and the rest of the CU staff for making this event just absolutely flawless and seamless. So thank you all for your really great effort. Thank you to Rebecca and Emiliana for supporting all of us in the work we do here. Thank you everyone here for spending the whole day with us. It's already a long day, I know. And also thanks to those who couldn't be here with us, but who are at the core of the work that you all are doing and the work that you all are doing out here as well. I wanted to say that we are also proud to be celebrating 5 years of collective ambition of among more than 60 organizations to align their organizational activities and vision to 1 or more 5 evidence-driven, evidence-based priority areas of access, quality, transitions, safety, and local leadership. These organizations came together in 2014 under a global commitment to action in support of Girls Charge, the Collaborative for Harnessing and Raising Ambition for Girls' Education. CUE has been proud to have served as its chair for the last 5 years and to see so much progress made in girls' education. To date, Girls' Charge has seen nearly 4 million more girls in school, over 200,000 teachers trained to deliver higher quality education for girls, and committed more than $1.1 billion to girls' education, including 500,000 leaders in girls' education to promote those efforts and to promote those dollars into the classroom and into girls' clubs around the world. So definitely great celebration, or a great reason to celebrate today, but I think also in vein of that, wanting to be critical, wanting to make sure that we're not just patting ourselves on the back for some progress made. I hope that you'll be able to use the networking reception to make connections with each other so that we can collaborate even further and make 100 more miles closer to the goal of achieving gender equality in and through education. So thank you to our Girls Charge members who have stuck it with us for the last 5 years. This networking celebration is in honor of all of you. So thank you so much, and thank you to our Echidna Global Scholars again for this wonderful day. Thanks.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos from Brookings.